Hi, everyone. So I don't think many of us would argue with the fact that the game industry needs more support for diverse creators. The more diverse our backgrounds, the more mature and accessible our medium will be. The more representation we have, the more lives we will touch. Events designed to support diverse game communities offer a chance to amplify new voices, support exciting new ideas, and encourage underrepresented creators. Today, the five of us will discuss our experiences as event coordinators and explore how each of our events have served game creators from underrepresented communities in order to empower our attendees, strengthen the industry, and push toward a better future for games. As Alexandra said, my name's Mertz. I am an independent designer and executive director of PixelPop and an MFA candidate at the NYU Game Center. With me today are four remarkably talented creators who each have experience organizing and coordinating events designed to support a diverse array of communities in games. So with that, I can't possibly introduce them as well as they can introduce themselves, so I'd like to go ahead and get started with Shawn, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, it was just on a weird interview about this game that I'm working on called Treachery Beatdown City, and the guy said, "So who are you?" Like to start, and an hour later. So yeah, I'm a game designer from New York. As my company brand, whatever, Nuchallenger, I've actually had this idea for a very long time to try to foster black and brown game devs in New York because I had no idea where to go. It took me till I was 30 to start making games. So I started working on my own game instead of trying to do the community thing. And I represent the Game Devs of Color Expo, which came out of kind of this, a bit of me kind of talking about this stuff, and Kat Small, who just really spearheaded an event. And then after a couple of years of her working on it, with the Brooklyn Gamery, we came together and started working on it. So that's what I represent.
Very cool. Alejandra?
Hi, I'm Alejandra, and I'm currently a senior at NYU studying game development and digital media. And I'm here because I helped organize a sex-positive game jam at NYU where people worked 12 hours, 10 hours on making games about sex positivity and sex education. And yeah, that's
great. Emmy, I realize these slides are backwards, so it's going to be really confusing on the last slide when everybody is in perfect mirror positions.
It works out, it's fine. Hi, I'm Emmy. I'm a workaholic. For the purposes of this space, I got my start as an events organizer after being a documentarian photographer, mostly focused on fringe events for marginalized people within the games industry. Showing off a little, all the photos you see up there are ones that I've taken at events that I have worked with. Because I'm a busybody, I kind of got involved on the organizational level because I'm a workaholic.
And Francesca?
Hi, everybody. My name is Francesca. I'm an independent designer and developer of games. I'm currently working with a studio that I helped co-found, Contigo Games. We focus on multiplayer, cooperative, and competitive games. Right now we're working on a game about magical girls, a little bit alternative, and a lot of fun. So right now I'm here representing Girls Make Games. We're an organization that runs summer camps as well as workshops for around middle school aged girls. So for the past, I've been working with them for about 4.5 years now as an ambassador and coordinator. So I've been working mostly at their Boston camp, and I've been the coordinator there for the past 2 years.
Awesome. So this is us for reference throughout the talk. I'd like to move on. I'd like to kind of learn from each of you, what really motivated you to get involved in your respective events. So Shawn, you said that it was started by the Brooklyn Gamery. What drew you to actually get involved with game devs of color?
Yeah, so I guess, going back, this has been, I don't know, when I was, I guess, I don't know, I did a talk for at Indiecade West, they John Sharp thought this talk was like interesting. I wasn't much in the indie game space, but I made a talk that was like how urban Black and Latino cultures could be the next frontier of indie games. Very very long talk, and then he did the worst thing he possibly could do, which was accept it. So then I spent the next 3 months writing a 40-page talk that included like psychological studies and like movies and dives into hip hop and everything. And since then, I basically just couldn't like shut things off. I was just like, it didn't make any sense. Like we live in a city that's like 45% Black and Latinx, and who invented hip hop, which is one of the most dominating like cultures in the world. And they did this by plugging things into like the walls, right? Like and also took like a blackout or two to like have people just get all this technology and do it. So I was just like, we're really at this point where it doesn't make any sense. So then that kind of had to sit in the back while I gave talks about this stuff. Kat was out here doing talks about a lot of things like UX, and I met her. I actually went to one of her UX talks because I didn't know her, but I saw her on Twitter, and we started talking, and I feel like, and then we were on a race and games talk at Indiecade, so it's been like kind of building for a while. And she started like a race and games like roundtable thing that was at NYU. It might have been something around different games, but from that became the first Game Devs of Color, which was like a lot of roundtables and then an arcade afterwards. And so I ended, and then the year after, she said, "Hey, do you want to do something with this?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely," because like I've been waiting for like, or trying to figure out how I could do something, and while she was out here doing stuff, and she was just doing stuff because she was just probably like, I don't know how else things are gonna happen, and she came and said to me and like a few other people like, "Hey, can you help?" And we put on this event that just like changed my life, and it's to the point where we're doing it again in two weeks. So it was just something that I had to do. Once all I needed was like an invitation. It's kind of like the interesting thing about like Black and brown people in the industry is that like information dissemination is a problem, and just having that like question of, "Hey, we want you to be a part of this," is like, then people say yes. Oh, cool. Like, you want me to be here? Sure. Like, because other people just assume otherwise, that there's just a no sitting there.
Yeah, so motivated by the idea of creating space for people that the space wasn't there before, right? So Francesca, you said that you're involved in Girls Make Games, which is a larger organization, right? So what drew you, like what motivated you to get involved?
Yeah, so the really cool thing about Girls Make Games is that we do all of these camps and events that are targeted at, like younger girls to increase their interest in technology and maybe consider that as a future career choice. But Girls Make Games also, they mostly we staff our camps with like young professionals who are looking to go into the industry and looking to learn more about game development. So actually the way that I got involved was I applied for a GDC scholarship from Girls Make Games. I was doing my undergrad in game development at the time, but had no means of like making it out to these larger conferences. So Girls Make Games gave me that opportunity, gave me the funding to go out and attend this really large event and network myself, and really that was when I felt like I changed from being like a student to a professional, and like getting out there in the world. So then after that, I started being involved in their camps. First as a counselor and then later as a coordinator, and now I'm helping them with workshops and events throughout the year.
That's so amazing. So you're like a product of the work that they're doing, and
yeah.
so therefore you're giving back. That's that's the ideal situation, right? Where we can raise everybody around us up to the point that they can help bring those bring that value and bring that that education to other people who are coming in behind us. So I mean, you've worked with a lot of different organizations and a lot of different events.
Many. We actually left a bunch off. There were more that I sent to Carol, and she was just like, "Please."
Her Twitter
no
wouldn't
more.
have fit on the screen.
It's too much. I've tried to trace back the arc of when I exactly started getting involved on an organizational level. And what I believe happened was that we opened the Baby Castles Gallery on 14th Street a number of years ago, and it turns out that it's really difficult to pay rent in New York City. I don't know if any of you know that, but shocking, but true. And
Really quick, can I have you explain what Baby Castles is?
Oh,
really
I apologize. So Baby Castles, as it was when we opened it, was a art gallery for independent games, seeking to give its creators a place to showcase their work using the vocabulary that you would with other forms of art. And in order to facilitate more kinds of people being able to collaborate with each other, it was a multimedia experience. So there would be games being shown, there would be sculptural work, there would be music performances, there would be murals. There were several components intended to be coexisting at the same time to facilitate all kinds of multidisciplinary creation. And turned out New York City rent is expensive in Manhattan. So don't do that. So we started having all kinds of events in order to try to help pay our rent and support marginalized creators. And as a result of that, I started getting involved in reoccurring event programming. In particular, I had been documenting a music subculture called chiptune, and I started curating the lineups for the longest running chiptune event series in the world called Pulse Wave. I also helped facilitate a monthly live comics, like not comedy, but like comics, the reading medium. It was live comics reading. There was another series that I was running as well. I also did a series of after parties. So for a while, if you were going to an after party for a conference in New York City at Baby Castles, I probably facilitated it. Additionally, I had gotten really into traveling around as much of the world as I could afford to. This was all coming out of my own pocket. And what I would do is I would go to a place and take photos of it and then come back. And then if I was lucky, I would be invited to act as staff. And in sitting on those staff meetings, people from other aspects of the planning committee would say, well, what would happen if we did this? And then I would say, well, I went to this place and they did it like this, and this is how they failed, or this is how they did really well. And that's how I sort of jumped from being just a photographer to being a organizer as well.
So you kind of wanted to just like reach as many organizations as possible and help as many people reach as many people as possible?
It was more like I had kind of like gathered up all this experience-based knowledge, and I didn't really see the point in keeping it to myself. As again, workaholic, I just kept picking up more and more projects because I was like, that sounds fun. And then I would just sort of be like, well, I saw this happen this way, and this is what went bad. I saw a lot of value in sharing what I experienced as I was moving around so much. Yeah.
Really cool. So Alejandra, on the flip side, you've done a single event that was incredibly successful at NYU, but you're also just starting your career in technology, right? So I'm curious, like, what drew you to the idea of a game jam? Because you're in the integrated digital media program, is that right?
That's correct.
And so it's kind of game adjacent, but not quite games. What was your thinking behind that?
So little background, I grew up in a very open-minded and very sex-positive family. My mom is super proud of her sexuality, and so I grew up with kind of that mentality. And so going into college, I wanted to like meet people like that, but it was kind of hard. Like, and I found a group called Bedsider, which Bedsider is a national organization to prevent like unplanned pregnancy in like teenagers. And so I took part of this. I joined the campus chapter. And we do a lot of like sex positive events and just kind of spread the word about birth control and just kind of like spread knowledge that people should know. But a lot of the events weren't very tech focused, and being in tech and like wanting to combine both my passions of sex positivity and games and just technology, I thought of a game jam would be a really great way to involve people in tech to like learn and like even just spread the word. Yeah,
that's really cool. So like, so you wanted people to learn and connect. Did you have other like goals or like ideas that you were like hoping people would get out of it? Did you have some like idea in your mind of what this would become?
Ooh, starting out was like, I didn't even think we were gonna do it. I just kind of like tossed the idea out, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. And I'm like, really? Okay. So I think I just wanted people to learn more, like the sex ed and like learning more about birth control and all that. But people came up to me afterwards and like, thank you. Like, I'm definitely more open into learning about sexuality. I'm very more proud of myself, and like, I never saw myself talking to peers about this kind of stuff. And so those are like things that I didn't like expect to come out of it, but like at the end I was like, yeah, no, this is amazing. But at the beginning it was just kind of like, all right, let's teach people about sex ed.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
yeah.
And Shawn, so you mentioned with Game Devs of Color that like the goal is to provide a platform for these voices that are like, there's so many people in New York that aren't being seen. How have you, like, have the goals adjusted? Have the goals changed at all? How do you target those goals and like really make them come to fruition at your expo?
Yeah. So yeah, the idea of New York being something is important. A lot of people keep saying, "Bring it here, bring it there." One thing that has already changed is, well, last year we had Aria Harvey from like Tale of Tales. Like, she spoke from France, like over web call. But this year we have 2 speakers from South Africa. Like, we had budgeting was a little better, but we basically blew our initial travel budget because I was like, hey, like somebody, Bahia Khan was like on Twitter, saw this. She was like, I think this is a beautiful event. I would love to apply. And I'm like, absolutely, please do it. And then it was like, oh, cool, these tickets are like $1,500. And it's like, well, we'll work it out. So we definitely want it to always be open to like the world. Like, that's very important. And I mean, that's like I guess a personal shift is, you grow up in New York. That's how I grew up, and you see things from a very like, this is very local lens, and then you start meeting a lot of people and you're like, oh yeah, this would be great because I really want to know about all these different opinions from across the world. And I guess that's kind of how it's changed. But also I feel like even just the name Game Devs of Color Expo, I think that name is very, very obvious and on the nose, and we want to grow the event to become more of a subversive expo. And also we don't, one of the things when I started was I really fought hard to get away from talks about specifically diversity, because like I've gone through that path of being like pigeonholed as that developer who just talks about these things. Like, even looking back at previews for my game, I realized that there's less spoken about my game and more just about like me being like poor and brown from the city. And it's just like, that's okay, I guess, but like can you talk about my game? Like, that's the thing that's important to me. Like, those other things are just who I am or who I was. So that's what the event is. It's not about like whatever. Like that's one of the things that it just kind of popped into my head at our keynote last year, where I was just like, you know what, we're done talking about this. It just is. And Black and brown people are going to be talking about games. We're going to talk about how cool we are, the culture that we're helping create. Like, we're advancing things, and that's just the way it is. Like, it's less about just staying in one lane and more about like learning more about different people, and then learning how they're making cool stuff. Like, the game developers conference isn't like, it's not about like one person, and you want to learn about lots of different things. Or like the Fader doesn't just cover like people from one specific part of the world. Like, you want to be more about these ascendant platforms.
Totally. So like representation is important, but support and resources are more so. And like offering people opportunities to talk about their work and not just where they're from is imperative, right?
Yeah, like the Oscars So White thing. Like, they're not saying let's have like the Black Awards, right? Like, they're saying let's put more Black people in the Oscars because we want to give them awards. They are part of this industry. And if you say, oh, well, you want to go have your like Black movie people awards to go get awards, it's like, no, like, we want you to fix it now.
Yeah, and if you're shaping your events in such a way where you are inherently curating them so that way they're including all kinds of people instead of just relegating them into, here is where the queer panel is, and here is where the women go, and here's where the people who aren't white, instead of just being like, hey, I want somebody who, like, to use your example from earlier, Shawn, when you mentioned VR, if you just get a whole bunch of different kinds of people who made VR games, then they can just talk about their work and how their perspective and their experiences inform their work rather than just compartmentalizing them based on their identity. And what that does in turn is shows, hey, look at these people who are being treated as equal contenders and professionals in this space. That means that I can do that too, and I'm not going to be relegated off into a corner somewhere. I get to be put on the same pedestal as everyone else, and that makes your space better. So even if you do have like a themed event, you know, like Game Devs of Color is a theme, and you know, chiptune is a restriction as far as curation goes, absolutely. But if you're creating an environment where all kinds of people can just speak for themselves as themselves and not based just what their identity is, like, again, using chiptune as an example, which I know is only, you know, games adjacent, it's not direct to games, but like all of my lineups always have a range of different types of people, and I apply that to my curation when I'm working on conferences and with my speakers as well. Like if you have an event, I call them white boy festivals. If you've curated a white boy festival, you have failed, because like we are a place that has so many kinds of different people, and if you only show one kind of person, like, what are you doing?
You're missing out on
What
so
are
many
you
different
doing?
stories, so many different opportunities, so much representation. So Francesca, you have a lot of camp coordinators and a lot of folks who help out with the girls who are learning how to make games at these camps and things. How does that process work? How do you meet those goals of making sure that these girls are well represented? Do you find, how do you find the coordinators? How do you find the people to teach?
Yeah, so generally, like, we initially will start with sort of just like an open call where we reach out to Twitter, we reach out to platforms where, we have an established presence already, and we reach out to past staff members to like facilitate that process as well. So as I said, like we get a lot of like young professionals who are starting their journey in games or have just started their journey in games, and they're bringing that sort of like curiosity and that passion for this industry into our camps and sharing that with the campers, and in turn the campers return that. Like, I've always been really inspired by them as well.
Yeah, that sounds great, and it sounds like a really good approach. So Alejandra, the sex positive game jam, you had speakers, is that right?
Yeah, we had one key speaker, Naomi Clark, who is an amazing person in general. She made the card game Consensical, which I don't if you guys have heard of it. It's about like an alien and a human like trying to have a relationship. And I think she was a great speaker because she talked about like how to like make games about sex. And we also had mentors at the event, which we had a porn scholar who was like she like knew everything about porn, where to go for feminist porn,
That's
where
so
to go.
cool.
Yeah, she like came to us being like, I want to participate. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. We had a AAA like game environmental artist, and he was super excited. He's like, I have no idea about like sex positivity, but I want in.
So how did you find all these folks? How did you get in touch with everyone?
Professors at NYU. We talked to like one or two professors who like knew all these people, and they're like, oh, like they sent out an email, and a lot of the mentors that we had reached out to us because they wanted to participate. Yeah, it was a very diverse group of mentors there.
Yeah, that sort of mirrors a conversation. I mean, like all of these experiences kind of sound like they're mirroring a conversation that Emmy, you and I had a couple days ago, right? Where we were talking about how really the best way to make sure that your event is thoroughly diverse is to take both applications for talks and curate a little bit and make sure that you're really thinking consciously about who is being represented on stage, and also opening it up so that it's not just the people who the organizers know, right? Like, because there's also a level of discrimination in doing just that. So I think that's really I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and there's another component where it's like who has the motivation to apply. And it's not necessarily that they're only one person, like one kind of person wants to apply. Lots of other people want to apply, but they don't feel empowered to do so.
Imposter syndrome is a huge part of the games industry, especially in independent communities.
Yeah, and because of how a lot of people are socialized on how and when they can take up space, even if they are an expert, they won't necessarily feel like they will be accepted if they apply. So part of it is sometimes empowering somebody by being like, hey, I want you here. Like, you are important, and so is your perspective, and I want to put you up on a pedestal and give you a chance to speak, so that way you can offset just having one kind of person speaking on, at your event. But there's all if you do that, then you're creating a bubble, right? If you're only curating, then you are creating a bubble where you will only ever have the same kinds of people speaking over and over again. It's cliques, right? And that is a problem that happens everywhere, regardless of how hard you are trying. You have to seek out new people who are outside of your social circle, and that's where submissions come in handy.
Totally, and this is such a great lesson that, I think a lot of us as event organizers, we wind up learning over time because we realize we see the same people on the panels and we see the same people submitting, so we realize we need to do something. So Shawn, from your experience, this is your second year being involved in Game Devs of Color. How have you seen, what kind of changes have you realized that you had to kind of shift and make? What have you learned that you've been able to apply to more recent years?
So last year, we definitely had the benefit of Kat running a lot of the stuff, a lot of stuff that I'm looking at the thing and I'm like, hey, who did this last year? And you're just like, Kat, because I helped curate games, I helped curate speakers, I did a lot of that stuff, but a lot of grunt work, just this invisible ninja stuff was just all done by her. So I'm learning. I'm really and last year I was like, man, that was hard. And then this year I'm just like, hey, I'm doing a lot more this year. And so I'm learning just where all the guts come from. Fundraising is something that you get some people who come back who are just we want to double our investment. That's awesome. You get other people who are just I'm done. And they leave, and that's kind of difficult because we've had a year of tumultuous, we're okay, but it took a little bit longer, so then you can't get certain people that you want. I was thinking, hey, we're gonna be able to do this and we're gonna do that, and I wanted to do a panel about streaming and being a personality on the internet, and I thought that would be very popular, and we got almost no applications. One of the only applications we got was from someone who I'd seen, who's a lady in the fighting game community, not in New York. So I saw her on Twitter because I just try to follow as many. That's for Rolodex thing. It's I see black person in games industry, I follow them immediately, and I'm just you're interested in something, you follow me. I see you in a YouTube video, especially now with content creators. Then other people introduce me, and I just keep adding people, and I just say, I'll send people. I'll be like, hey, please do this. And so
that's such a great tip for expanding your social circles and being aware of the kinds of people that you want to be able to open your event up to.
Yeah, definitely. And so that was, the event's very different than what I guess I'd had a vision. And we also got pitched a really cool Latinx in games event thing that I was just that wasn't a specific topic I was looking for. And then I was just well, I want all of you here anyway, and I want you to talk about what you do and more about how you infuse who you are and what you do. And they were all cool, because at first I was you take on the whole I'm the person and I have these ideas in mind, and it's sometimes you have to break those things, because then I was just wait, if I said, hey, could you guys be on different panels or whatever, that would make other people feel uncomfortable, and you have to be willing to compromise that. And just to everybody talk about getting more people. It's limit people on events, limit people on the events that are coming to you. If don't keep having the same speakers. If someone keeps applying to be a speaker, it's you can't just you might end up be tokenizing that person if that person's a queer black woman or just a transgender Indian person or something, and you're I'm looking for this person and they're still here. It's you keep having the same people because you're getting that one person's opinion. That's cool, but you're not allowing like other people into the space because you're not looking hard enough for other people.
Totally raise up new voices, right?
There are two things that I want to comment on regarding that. One tactic that I found that sort of offsets that is if you have somebody speak a couple of times in a row, and they are an industry veteran, and they are, they have a lot of valuable experience, and they're established, and they're okay now. Treat them, I call it a legacy status, where you give them time off. So if you have a couple legacy people speak one year, then you give them the next year off and you bring back different legacy people to make sure that you still are having people who are in a mentorship position be available for your audience and speak to their expertise, but you're changing it occasionally, and you're giving newer people, instead of like just having across the board legacy people, you're boosting new voices. And I think Shawn touched on something really important, which is funding people. I feel very strongly that you should not book anyone for anything unless you can cover at minimum their transportation and lodging. And if you can give them food, you should. And at this point, I am extremely against unpaid labor from people who are supporting your event, for a lot of reasons that I will not get into right now. But like, I feel very strongly that it is better to have a smaller, focused event that makes sure everyone can get paid, especially if you are focused on marginalized people who don't have the resources to just donate their time and their ability to buy their food and find a place to stay and travel. Like, sure, you're giving them an opportunity by giving them a platform, but if you're taking money out of their bank account, then like, are you really helping, or are you just contributing to a system of exploitation? And that's something that over the years, I am somebody who came up through an event system that was inherently exploitative, and I want to fix this for the future. So, budget for people's well-being.
Totally. So Francesca, Girls Make Games actually pays all of their mentors, right? They pay all of their camp coordinators. Can you talk about like what goes into that process and like how that's handled, and where, do you have any insight into how that funding actually happens? Because I'm sure that that's what a lot of us struggle with, like Shawn said, like Emmy said, like how do we find the funding to be able to pay for the talent, the minds that we have?
Yeah, so I think Girls Make Games is a relatively young organization. We've been running for less than 10 years. So definitely, like, when we were much smaller, this was definitely something that was a struggle, and we had to figure out how to genuinely compensate people for their time. So yeah, all camp counselors and staff are always paid. Initially, maybe we weren't able to pay as much as some other internship or opportunity that people might go to for like a short-term summer position. But I think like Girls Make Games really makes up for that. As I said, like I've been involved with them since I was a student in undergrad and kind of breaking into the industry. And I think that Girls Make Games really, they leverage sort of their status and all of their connections, and really like it becomes a family for the people who have gone through, we call it like the fellowship program for people who are staffing the camps, as well as the girls who are actually going through the camp. A lot of them continue into careers in technology and games. I think like some of our first campers are now reaching like, they're applying to college programs, which is really exciting.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's really great. And a lot of them are still working on games. And they are coming back to the Girls Make Games community and finding a lot of support and a lot of connections there as well. And I've definitely felt that, like, as I've been involved with them for many years, that I continue to feel supported by them and wanting to give back to that community.
Yeah, I think this is a really good thread. I'd like to kind of like continue on this like ways of like thinking about events. How can we continue to improve our events? How can we continue to make it such that they're as supportive as possible of these communities? Because clearly, like, we've all designed our events around the idea of lifting up marginalized voices. How can we continue to do that as strongly as possible so that we're impacting as many lives as possible? Like, how can we make that sustainable moving forward?
That's such a good question, right? Like that's the big one right there. And like I feel like there are so many pieces to that, because we both have to create environments and communities where people feel safe and like they can come into them and be new voices and like they'll be supported. But we also have to take care of ourselves, because that's the unfortunate side of this, right? Like a lot of the times, the people who are curating these events are marginalized themselves in a variety of capacities. And, you know, like there are heaps of intersections of that, even just up here on this panel that I will not get into because, you know, but like we also have to make sure that we're being taken care of. Like we need support also. As organizers, like we also need to get paid.
We're dedicating hours and hours and hours and months and, you know, potentially years of our lives to organizing these events. And so many of us do it on a volunteer basis.
Yeah. And burnout is real. Like, you know, like this monstrous thing. There I am. Like, that's so much, right? And I'm constantly tiring myself out, and I'm constantly shedding projects because I'm exhausted. And if we rely on certain people to do certain things too much and we aren't giving enough back to them in return, like, we're gonna get tired too. And like that goes for our, you know, the people who I just named as legacy people too. Like, sure, if they're established, like they have a support in a way that somebody who's new might not, but they also still need care to make sure that they aren't driven out of the community that they're trying to help. I mean, you know, we're in games. We all know what drove out a lot of people from games, right? We have to protect our important leadership voices so that way when people attack them, they don't leave us. And that's a major problem. It's a major problem, not just in games.
Yeah, like codes of conduct, making sure that we know how to enforce our codes of conduct, making sure that we ourselves are protected as organizers, making sure that all of our attendees are protected.
That's a whole nother talk that
I have
pitched to a different conference that you might be able to see somewhere in Canada.
Does anybody else have like thoughts, even for your own event, like how you foresee changing it, you know, evolving it in the coming year or years? How you can see it, you know, moving forward to improve and to be that much better for supporting the communities that you support.
Yeah. So can I talk a little bit about like how we are changing? Because I'm really excited about it. So as I said, like Girls Make Games is a pretty young organization, and in the past years we've been running like camps and workshop. We're mostly in like major cities. Internationally, but mostly in the United States. And it has been a lot about establishing ourselves so that we're able to make this network and give back to the people who are able to make all of these events possible for the girls. But we are actually now developing an online curriculum, which now we're focusing more on outreach and giving back to this community, and for all of the children who are interested in technology but can't make it out to the camps, or like aren't able to find like housing to come to those cities to attend the camps when we do them. So we're doing now like a completely online curriculum. So if you're not able to make it to a camp, you can, you know, go through the tutorials online step by step. And it's something that we're currently curating and working on, and I'm really excited about it.
That's great. Any other thoughts before we open it up to questions? Cool.
Yeah, I guess trying to figure out. I feel like this is like always the cycle of like marginalized people is like figuring out business plans, like figuring out ways of pitching your event early on and like trying to get that money, like, and do it with, because we were talking about this before, like imposter syndrome being very real. But like, I mean, I was at a Northside Festival out in Williamsburg one year where I was the AV tech. And they were like, how many people in here are like an entrepreneur? And I put my hand up while this room of people who all spent a ton of money to be here did that. And this guy from like who founded Yo, like Yo is a social media app where all you can send is Yos. And he talked really seriously about it, and he got like $500,000 in seed funding, and I wanted to burst into flames because I'm sitting here running the AV tech to pay my rent. While this guy, like, and I'm just thinking about it, how like it's like the funding cycle is really weird. But if you're excited about your event, and you're excited about it early on, and you can put that together in like a deck, like you can pitch that and try to get money early on and try to, and then just figure out how to educate yourself so that you can hopefully maybe be able to have a little bit of staff or somebody like. One of the things that helped save this event, like a Brian Chung and a GJ Lee, like they are also events coordinators, and they showed their game at our event last year, and they came on board to help. And people like Alexander King, like he just was like, hey man, can I help you? Like a lot of people are like, hey man, can I help you? It took us a lot to sit back and say, I can't do everything. So yes, I had to actually like take time and say, what do we need help with? But then other people were like, oh, I can help you. And I was like, with what? And they're like, support. We can't really give money. And I'm like, well, figure out what you can help me with and then pitch it back to me, because we're at the point where I need you to give me specifics on how to help me. So it's like figuring out what you need to help you will help you like be able to say, okay, I need a year off from this, but there's 5 people right here that can take it because we cultivated this, or maybe cultivate from your community.
Yeah, I feel really lucky personally that I came into event coordination from a business background. Like I ran a studio, and so I knew how to do budgeting. I knew how to bring in people. I knew how to delegate work, and that's been so important to me. And I take it for granted because it's such a part of my life. But to be able to budget well and to be able to know how to make a good pitch deck and how to talk to people that you're trying to sell your sponsorships to. It's still hard, even with that experience. How can folks get in touch with you after the panel, and where can they learn more about your events?
I live on Twitter, so that's me. Or Shawn at Nuchallenger.com is my email, and then GameDevsOfColorExpo.com.
And it's happening in 2 weeks?
It's happening on the 14th of July. Also, I have business cards if you want just more info.
You can reach me at my Twitter. I just got on this, so I'm like still very new to this. And then my email is Villanueva, which is my last name, .a@nyu.edu. Feel free to shoot me a message about anything sex positive or sex education related. I can go on for hours about that. So please feel free.
I am on every internet under the sun. It's tiring. But if you Twitter, of course, is there. And if you Google my name, it's completely ridiculous. You will find me.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Chesky, which is up there. But if you're more interested in finding out about specifically what Girls Make Games is up to, we're at Girls Make Games or girlsmakegames.com.
Cool. And I am also on Twitter, pixelpopfestival.com. PixelPop Festival is happening in St. Louis on July 28th and 29th.
I'll be there.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you guys so much.